A very good evening and welcome to a brand new edition of Face to Face, coming to you direct from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo, bringing you face to face this evening. I am Jayama Ratnayaka for the Newsfirst team. As Sri Lanka continues its economic recovery supported by an extended fund facility through the IMF, all focus has now shifted on a milestone which is coming up next month, which is the presidential election, which will choose the president for the next 5 years who will lead Sri Lanka for better or for worse. To talk about this and much more, we have in our studios this evening a returning guest, no stranger to the show. He is a parliamentarian, M.A. Sumanthiran, President's Council, representing the Tamil National Alliance and also Jaffna District. A very good evening to you, Mr. Sumanthiran, and welcome.
Good evening to you.
So, Mr. Sumanthiran, you have always been very vocal and you have always been someone who has been in the media exposing matters that are of national interest to the people and being vociferous about matters that are of concern to, or rather of public interest. So, I want to firstly tonight touch upon one such concern, which is the possible constitutional crisis that might arise from the Supreme Court's determination regarding the current IGP. We know what transpired between the IGP and the Supreme Court, and the current IGP, Deshamantu Tennakoon, has been suspended from holding office as of now based on an interim injunction that was imposed by the Supreme Court. But the President has somehow expressed his concern over appointing an acting IGP on the basis that he is a presidential candidate, or he's a candidate who will be contesting the upcoming presidential election, and he has therefore asked the Speaker to take into consideration this matter. And that has given rise to a lot of debate, and we saw over the past few weeks various opinions being expressed about this. And because you are an expert in constitutional law, I want to ask you, is Sri Lanka heading towards a potential constitutional crisis by the President not fulfilling the constitutional duties imposed on him purely based on the fact that he is a candidate at the upcoming presidential election?
No, I don't think there will be a constitutional crisis as such. Clearly, the President is stalling the process. Clearly, he is not happy with the interim order given by the Supreme Court. But that doesn't excuse him from not carrying out his constitutional duties, which only he can do as President. The fact that he is a candidate doesn't disable him or place him at a disadvantage. I did have a chat with him on this issue, and when I told him that he must appoint an acting IGP, he said, but there might be an election petition.
Right.
I don't think an election petition can succeed on this basis. But I told him that if he is actually worried about that, that he could ask the Speaker to convene a meeting of the party leaders in Parliament,
right,
and have the party leaders jointly nominate someone, give him the name, and he merely forwards that name or makes an appointment. In that case, it is not he who makes the choice as to who acts for the IGP. Now, in Parliament, when the Prime Minister said that we don't accept the Supreme Court's ruling, etc., that was totally out of order. He could never say such a thing. And he had said that the position of the IGP is not vacant.
Right.
That may be so. If the IGP suffered a stroke and in hospital and is unable even to sign, the post is not vacant. But you certainly have to appoint
the duties have to be fulfilled.
Acting person. In fact, when Pudit Jayasundara was arrested, there was another person appointed as acting IGP, while Pudit Jayasundara was still the IGP.
Yes.
So, this is not a new thing that has happened. When the incumbent in office is unable to carry out his functions, then somebody else must be appointed to act in that place. The President's refusal to do this, I don't think is going to have much of an impact.
I see.
Yes, there is a reference to the IGP insofar as the election commission directives are concerned, but IGP is also the institution. I mean, when we refer to the Attorney General, we don't mean that one person who's Attorney General.
Yes.
It's a whole department. So therefore, any senior DIG who is in charge of elections, for instance, must carry out the directions that are given by the Election Commission in such a situation.
Right. So delving deeper into that matter, especially the statement made by Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena once the Supreme Court's verdict came a couple of weeks ago, he said that the Supreme Court has no jurisdiction over decisions of Parliament, saying that and we saw how President Ranil Wickremesinghe himself that said that the Constitutional Council is a committee that falls within Parliament, and that the Supreme Court or the Judicature has no jurisdiction over that. But is there actually a truth to that matter, given the fact that there are civil society representatives also who are sitting at the Constitutional Council? Does the Supreme Court in fact
earlier on he claimed that it was part of the executive, and when he made that claim,
yes,
the reasoning he gave was that the decisions of the Constitutional Council were subject to review by the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Now suddenly he does a volte-face and says that no, but it's part of legislature.
Yes.
You know, it is part of the legislature in the sense that the Speaker is the head, and meetings take place there, but it's not really strictly part of the legislature. It's not legislative function that they carry out. It's a sua generis kind of function. It's not, you can't even call it executive in that sense. It's a check on the executive powers, and made reviewable by the Constitution. So one doesn't have to split hairs to figure out whether it is legislative function or executive function. It can be neither. It doesn't matter. So they are clearly wrong in saying that. In fact, if the Prime Minister, what the Prime Minister said in Parliament, someone has challenged him to come out and say it publicly. If he actually believes that is the case, he must be bold enough to say that in public. He won't do that. So they themselves know that what they are saying is wrong.
So these are just tactics to prolong this saga.
Just stall this process. I don't know for what. The President has now come out and declared his candidacy. If he doesn't want the election to happen, then he may be trying to do something to stall the election. But I don't think the election can be stalled in this way.
I see.
So one doesn't understand what he's really doing when he behaves like this.
Because it seems like an act of double standards, because the President says that he cannot appoint an acting IGP given the fact that he is a candidate at the election and fearing legal consequences. But when 92 MPs of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peruna pledged his support, it was the PMD that issued a media release and future releases also regarding developments in the President's campaign. Therefore, the President's media division is also...
Yeah, that is an abuse of power. That is an abuse of office. President's media division cannot be issuing statements such as that, saying so and so has is supporting the President and so on and so forth. So he doesn't see a problem in doing that, but only in the case of the appointment of an acting IGP, which is a constitutional duty of his, that he seems to have this problem. So there is a huge contradiction there.
Right, understood. So moving on from that, Mr. Sumanthiran, we saw the President had travelled to the north last week, more particularly on Friday, and according to the PMD, speaking to those who were present at the event, he had said the collapse of the economic and political system was built on borrowing and unfulfilled promises. But if you track back to the Good Governance government, borrowing occurred even during the Yahapalne government, and in record numbers as well. Some of the MPs who are now supporting the President, who are of the SLPP, actually came forth and published these numbers and criticized him for these numbers. But unfortunately or fortunately, they are now siding with the president. So, do you really believe that it was that which caused the downfall of the nation, or do you believe
that's part of the problem, that we borrowed without proper planning, without thinking of how we would repay those loans. There are many causes for this: mismanagement, corruption, and wastage, and of course the war, the internal civil conflict that we had for so long, and the funding that went towards that, which was also opaque given the nature of the war. There was no transparency, and an unavoidable war at that. So all of that put together pulled the country down, and it went down a precipice.
So, talking about the war and national unity and reconciliation, Mr. Sumanthiran, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution has been brought up by many presidents, successive governments and whatnot. Even President Ranil Wickremesinghe has been very vocal about it, and recently during his visit to the North, he had mentioned that it won't be 13 plus or 13 minus, but the implementation of 13th Amendment itself. And more recently, he had mentioned that he wants to empower provincial councils and have a discussion about delegating police powers as well. So, do you believe, as a Tamil politician who is spearheading and leading the Tamil communities, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution in its full implementation will be a solution to national unity and reconciliation in the country?
No, I don't think 13th Amendment is sufficient to fulfill the aspirations of the Tamil people, for the simple reason that it has no meaningful devolution built into it. What you give with one hand, you can take away with the other, and that we have continuously seen happening. And there are various other features that need to be put right. That is the reason why even Mahinda Rajapaksa, after the war ended, promised many times that he will implement the 13th Amendment in full, but he did not stop there. He said, and go beyond that, build upon it so as to achieve meaningful devolution. So, meaningful sharing of powers of governance is the way forward, and to that extent, whatever that is in the 13th Amendment that sort of stands in the way of meaningful devolution must be put right. President Ranil Wickremesinghe knows this inside out. In fact, in the last parliament, he was chairman of a steering committee of the Constitutional Assembly, and we worked hard to rectify these issues that we have in the 13th Amendment. So, he knows that in full. So, full implementation is not the answer, but certainly 13th Amendment is not an addendum to our Constitution, it is part of our Constitution. So, anybody who has sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution must implement it in full. There is no point in saying, I will do this, but I will not do that. Pick and choose what you will comply with in the Constitution. So, 13th Amendment must be implemented in full, no question. But one must go beyond that and see whether a meaningful sharing of powers of governance can be achieved.
Right. So, I asked you that question because I saw the President addressing a certain forum last week, and he was saying that I understand that one government is not enough, therefore I will construct 9 governments, and members of parliament will also be allowed to contest the provincial council elections, and if they do get in, they can be a member of parliament and also be a chief minister if they get the required number of votes. But do you believe that that mechanism will be successful, Mr. Sumanthiran?
No, it will not be successful at all. That will again be a serious issue in achieving meaningful devolution. That's not the answer. Of course, what we discussed during the last attempt at a new constitution, where he was chairman of the steering committee, this suggestion never came from him. What we discussed was a second chamber in the center, a Senate, which will have representatives from the provincial councils.
Yes, okay.
So that like in India, where the Rajya Sabha actually comes from the states,
yes.
and it's a sort of a check and balance on power devolution as well as it is with certain types of legislation, etc. So that was a suggestion that even he promoted at that time. In 2010 or 11, when we had discussions with the Mahinda Rajapaksa government, when Mahinda Rajapaksa kept saying 13 plus, that plus was the Senate, which composed of representatives from the provinces. So there had been a wide acceptance that in order to bring provinces' concerns to the center, that you have a second chamber in the center, not for members of parliament in the center to go and become members of the provincial council. No, that was never the case, never the suggestion. And I know he just plucked this out of thin air and he's put it on the table.
So that was just an act of simply gaining political mileage, you believe?
I don't know what it is. I see it as more as complicating this issue further.
Okay. So talking about the unfulfilling of the aspirations of Tamil communities in Sri Lanka, successive governments have failed to do so, and on the 22nd of July, 7 political parties and 7 civil organizations decided to band together and sign a memorandum of understanding to form the Tamil People's General Council. Some significant Tamil political parties, including the TELO, the Tamil Makkal Kootani, Plot, and several other parties and civil organizations inked this agreement, and they decided on appointing a Tamil common candidate or fielding a Tamil common candidate at the upcoming presidential election. But a notable absence or an absentee was the ITAC at that particular meeting. Why is that? Do you not believe the prospect of a Tamil common candidate coming and being named as the presidential candidate?
No, we think it's a very bad idea. Our party discussed it.
Yes.
And overwhelmingly there was opposition to this idea within the party. Of course, we said we don't have to make a decision on any of these just yet, that we must have discussions with all the main candidates. And we've had official discussions already with 2 candidates. And we will continue with that and then decide at the end who we will support. The Tamil common candidate idea is a very bad one. It actually will make the Tamil cause weak.
Why do you say so?
Because if you see, if you have a voting or a referendum of sorts to find out people's views about right to self-determination, federal solution, etc., they then vote for that issue. But when there is a presidential election, each one will have a preference as to who they want to be the president of the country.
Understood.
They will vote for that, not to use that election to send some other message.
Right.
So it's not a fair representation.
It's a clash of ambitions.
Yeah, ambitions. Lots of other issues also come into the fray, and you must never do that. There must be a very clear question to which they give the answer. This is not such an election.
I see.
So it actually endangers interpretation saying that, well, the Tamil people don't want a right to self-determination, etc. When this candidate fails, this candidate, even if they field a candidate such as this, is doomed to fare very badly. So that's a crazy idea. It's a bad idea, and many of us have publicly condemned it
and opposed it.
Yeah.
Right. So that prospect be that as it may, they still haven't announced who the candidate will be, so I believe internally they too are having their own challenges to rectify before naming a potential candidate. But we know the Tamil National Alliance and the ITAC is the main constituent of the Tamil National Alliance, which is a main driving force of the Tamil communities. You have given leadership over many decades to the Tamil communities in Sri Lanka, and who you support at this presidential election will potentially determine or tip the scales in the favor of one candidate. But you said that you have had conversations, you have engaged in conversations with two presidential candidates, where I'm assuming it's Sajith Premadasa and Anurukumara Dissanayake.
That's right.
And President Ranil Wickremesinghe has also announced his candidature. Have you not engaged, as the TNA, not engaged in conversation with Ranil Wickremesinghe?
We've engaged in conversations with him with regard to implementation of the power sharing arrangements
Yes.
that are in the constitution, etc. In his capacity as the president. So far we have not discussed with him what we would like him to say as to fulfilling the aspirations of the Tamil people if he is to win this election. I'm sure we will have an opportunity of doing that also. But with regard to the other two candidates, we have very clearly spelt out, and both have said they will implement the 13th Amendment to the Constitution in full. They have not said anything more.
Right.
Anurukumara Dissanayake said that they also acknowledge that 13th Amendment is not the solution to the Tamil national question.
Right.
That there will be a new constitution, and in the new constitution they will discuss and come to an negotiated settlement with regard to that.
Right.
Sajith Premadasa also, I must say, did say at the last election that he will carry forward the process that was commenced in the last parliament and take it to a close. When President Ranil Wickremesinghe convened an all-party conference soon after he became president, Sajith Premadasa came there and brought all of those files that were the reports of that process and said he is stand by all of that and he'll take it. So that goes beyond the 13th Amendment. So we have somewhat of a consensus between those two candidates saying yes, 13th Amendment, and yes, maybe more than that. We need to discuss this with the other candidates also.
Right. So if my memory serves me right, the Central Committee meeting of the TNA will be happening on the 11th, and do you wish to plot the future course of action at that meeting? Will you finalize a decision, or will you wait a bit more until the
I don't think we'll
manifestos?
finalize a decision by the 11th.
Right.
We will take stock, but I don't think we'll make a decision then. We will await the publication of the candidates' manifestos, and also hold further discussions with them with regard to actual implementation of whatever they promise. As you said, when there is a three-way contest or more than three candidates in the fray, significant candidates in the fray, then our vote becomes all the more important.
Decisive, yes.
And so we will not be in a rush to make a decision with regard to who we support, but we will hold talks, negotiate hard, and then make our decision.
So will the basis of the TNA support be based primarily on the power sharing mechanism and the implementation of the 13th Amendment, or are there other demands and objectives that you wish to fulfill through supporting a potential candidate?
Primarily it will be on resolving what we call the Tamil national question, and that's a power sharing arrangement.
Yes.
But we will not be blind to very serious issues that face a country like corruption, for instance.
Yes.
So we will look at that as well, because every issue in the country has always been further complicated by corruption. So I think one of the biggest issues that the country needs to tackle is corruption, and we are very, very conscious about that. And so personalities who are known to be corrupt, being very close to one candidate or another, will be closely watched by us.
Understood. So we will cross over for a short commercial break. I am in conversation with parliamentarian M.A. Sumanthiran, President's Counsel, and parliamentarian of the Jaffna district. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Newsfirst, face to face with Jamal Ratnayaka.
Voice Teens ගායන ශිල්පිනී නදුනි යමීෂාගේ නවතම ගීතය Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube ඇතුළු ඔබගේ ප්‍රියතම සංගීත සේවාවන් හරහා රස විඳින්න.
Entertainments.
මම අනුවස් ආත්මාර්ථකාමී. එහෙම තමයි හැමෝම හිතන්නේ.
අම්මගේ ජීවිතේ වෙනුවෙන් මම සල්ලි ඉල්ලන්නේ. පොඩ්ඩක් තේරුම් ගන්නව. ඉතින් මට කියන ඔබ දීපන්කෝ. මට සල්ලි දෙන්න මම දෙනවා බං.
හැබැයි මට ඕනේ දිනන්න. මේ ජීවිතේ දිනන්න. අම්මගේ හීනට කොහොම හරි යනවා. එතෙන්දී මාව ආත්මාර්ථකාමී විදිහට පෙනේ. කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. දවසක මම දිනනවාමයි.
දොළොස් වනදා සිට සතියේ දිනවල රාත්‍රී 8ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්
සිම්පත හරියට ලියාපදිංචි කරගෙන තියෙන්න ඕන. සමහර වෙලාවෙම දන්නෙත් නැහැනේ.
මේ සිම්පත කොයිතරම් වැදගත්ද කියලා මේ දුරකථන පාවිච්චි කරන හැම දෙනාම දන්නේ නැහැ කියලා තමයි මම කියන්නේ.
මැයි වලින් පස්සේ ලොකු ගංවතුර තත්ත්වයක් එන්න නියමිතයි කියලා. කාලගුණ විද්‍යාඥයින් අනතුරු අංගවන පසුබිමක ඔබ කොයි විදිහටද මේ අපේ තෙත්බිම් සම්බන්ධයෙන් දකින්නේ?
කොළඹ නගරයේ තියෙන නාගරික තෙත්බිම් වලින් 21%ක් තියෙන නාගරික තෙත්බිම් වලින් වැසි ජලයෙන් 39%ක් රඳවා ගන්න බව.
දැන් විලද නගරයට කටයුතු කරන කට්ටිය දැන් එනවා පරිපාලන නගරයට. ඔතුමේ දන්න හැටි අපි ගත්තොත් අරවටුකොට එහෙම නැත්නම් කිඹුලවල ප්‍රදේශයේ අපිට තියෙනවා රැයට කෑම කඩ. ඉස්සර එක තිබ්බ කොහෙද? කොළඹ. මොකද දැන් ගොඩ දෙනෙක් මේ පැත්තට එන්න පටන් ගන්න. මොකද ඒගොල්ලන්ට අර කොළ පාට ගතිය. මේ තියෙන බ්‍රීස් එක කියන්නේ ඇඟට දැනෙන වෙනස අනිවාර්යෙන් දැනෙනවා.
ජාතික මෙහෙවර සතියේ දිනවල උදෑසන 11ට.
Newsfirst, face to face with Jamal Ratnayaka.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I am in conversation with President's Counsel M.S. Sumanthiran, parliamentarian representing the Tamil National Alliance. Mr. Sumanthiran, before we crossed over for the commercial break, you said that the basis of your support will depend on multiple features. One included is corruption and how a potential presidential candidate will end corruption in our country. And recently we saw how MP Rasaken Shanake Rasmanikem and you made a call for all presidential candidates who are going to be contesting at the upcoming election to come to a common platform and to debate all of these matters. How is the progress on that?
Well, we've discussed this with a few candidates and they have generally sort of agreed that that's a good idea. We need to work out the other sort of details with regard to this. There was to be a debate between Sajid Premadas and Anura Kumar Sanaka, which never took place.
Yes, understood.
But what we hope to do is to sort of host an event at which perhaps 2 or 3 other more candidates also can participate. And crucial issues such as corruption would be the primary thing. But also, the handling of the economy, the Tamil national question, issues like that also
will be brought up.
But primarily with regard to corruption and assurances, more detailed assurances to the people as to how they would handle particular issues. Because if you look back at the Araga layer, I think the basic underlying protest was about corruption.
Yes.
And that is what the country is sort of yearning for, a corruption-free administration. So it's crucial to have the aspirants to these office telling the people and being forced to tell the people how they will
to make an assurance.
Yeah. So we offered our services to host such an event.
Right. So how are the logistical arrangement for that?
They haven't worked that out. That has to be done in agreement with them. But some event in which the
has there been any response from those candidates? Or
well, generally, general responses are that's a good thing and so on. But
no stellar commitment.
No, not yet.
Okay.
So we will pursue that and
see that it reaches
actually materializes.
Understood. So moving out from politics, Mr. Sumanthiran, and going into something of national interest, and this matter has been talked about over the months. It came to a very interesting development last Friday when the Supreme Court issued another determination. This is regarding the VFS deal to outsource the processing of online visas, arrival visas to Sri Lanka, and it was marred in controversy. We know that you and a couple of other parliamentarians filed fundamental rights petitions against it, and the Supreme Court did honor your pleas and issued an interim order. So can you just give me and the viewers a brief on what events unfolded on Friday and the plan that you guys have plotted to take next in relation to this matter?
So this was a deal shrouded in secrecy. You see, nobody really knew how this transition had happened until some traveller who was coming back into the country raised an alarm as to why some foreigners were issuing visas, etc. There was a clarification issued, but then that brought the issue to the fore, and then the Committee on Public Finance in Parliament inquired into it, and the three of us who went to the Supreme Court, Rauf Hakim, Champika Ranawaka and myself, are members of the Public Finance Committee, and there we saw what had happened. But we had to wait until the report of the Public Finance Committee was tabled in Parliament, because what happens in committee cannot be published until it is tabled in Parliament.
Yes.
So we had access to these documents, but we waited until it was tabled on the 12th of July, I think.
Right.
And then we decided that the size of this fraud is so huge, incomparable, right, to anything else that has happened before.
Right.
So we decided that we must stop this, have this stopped immediately, and so we worked on petitions, and we went to court. There were various other parties also,
yes,
that later filed petitions and were heard that day. I think we established before court that the whole process was flawed. In fact, there was no process at all. It was unsolicited proposal. No procurement guidelines followed, and so on. And there was a subsisting contract with Mobitel that could not have been terminated for convenience. Nevertheless, it was terminated without any notice whatever. And whatever it is, Mobitel is controlled by the state.
Yes.
It's owned half by the state. So whatever charges they do is within, it actually comes back to the state. Back to the state. And what they were charging $1 for this operation, here is $25 odd going to somebody else's pocket. And the process by which it happens is also totally flawed. The monies are paid, it goes to some company in Dubai, and once in 7 days it's routed through that bank account in Dubai, and they send what they think is due to the government of Sri Lanka. So all that is in violation of all the established processes, constitutional provisions with consolidated fund, etc. of the country. So Supreme Court gave an interim order to suspend their operation forthwith and to continue with the status quo ante that prevailed prior to this taking place. The argument in the main matter has been fixed for 7th of October.
I see.
This is only leave to proceed, and an interim order has been granted.
Okay. So what was the response from the councils representing the respondents? What were their arguments or submissions?
The main issues that we presented were not met. Even from the state, the only argument that was being presented was that those companies must be given an opportunity of being heard,
right,
prior to any interim order being considered. And those company lawyers said they didn't have adequate time, although they had all got notices,
right,
and they wanted more time. And when that was refused by court, they said they will not participate in the proceedings. But at the end of the day, one of them came back and again pleaded with court not to make any interim order without them being heard.
Right.
But they had already walked out of the courtroom. So, I mean, I'm a petitioner in the case, and matter is pending before court. So whatever I say should not have any bearing on final outcome. But on the force of arguments that we placed on that day, court saw it fit to grant us the interim relief.
Right. But in a general sense, Mr. Sumanthiran, judging by what Sri Lanka has gone through over the past 2 to 3 years, and how there was a mass uprising against corruption at one point where they said 225 plus 1 should go home, and when Sri Lanka is barely raising its head, it's truly regrettable to see matters of this nature, discrepancies, irregularities taking place, and these fly-by-night agreements where there's absolutely no transparency taking place. But where is the due diligence, where is the integrity of those who are making decisions for Sri Lanka, especially at this time of need?
Actually, I must say, I mean, I've been in direct politics for almost 15 years. And in the first few years, I was shocked to see the kind of corruption that was, so blatant and being blasé going on. But when COVID hit, I thought, nobody will make money on COVID. No,
it wasn't the case.
That wasn't the case. Yeah. They saw a great opportunity then. And then we had the economic collapse. And for God's sake, it was the economic collapse, right? And one would have thought, okay, now is not the time to make money. No, they saw much greater opportunity in making money on the economic collapse. So that is, pitiful state that the country is in with regard to corruption. And so one is justified in having a sympathy for the general populace wanting a system change. Without a actual system change, you can't put this right.
So if the people do want to make a system change, the 21st of September will be an ideal starting point for them. And when deciding on who to vote, when deciding on who they will love and give the reins of the country to be governed for the next 5 years, in your professional experience as a politician for several decades, what should the people truly take into consideration, and what is the responsibility and the role from the part of the people which should be extended to Sri Lanka coming out of this crisis?
See, the contradiction here is that people want a system change, but the elections and whatever that is to happen is part of the system. So the question arises whether you can stay within the system and have the system change. But to the extent possible,
yes,
I think holding those who take the reins accountable for everything, and people being vigilant constantly. They say eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, not just of liberty, but to combat corruption,
ensure there are checks and balances,
all of that. And I think the citizenry must be awake constantly and hold those persons accountable every moment. So if we can at least change that, corruption thrives because people also put up with it. We are responsible for the corruption because if somebody is taking a bribe, somebody else is actually giving that bribe. So that conscientizing the citizenry, that if we say zero tolerance to corruption, that they must also not participate
because
in
corruption begets more corruption.
Yes. They
Yes.
must not participate. A line must be drawn. So well, that is the reason why we want to have this discussion and things like that in public, and more than persons, the aspirants to office, I think more important is to conscientize the citizenry that the responsibility is actually ours. If leaders are corrupt, we are the ones who put them in there.
Yes.
So to the extent that we prescribe how it must be, they will also perform.
They will also fall in line. Understood. My guest this evening on Face to Face was parliamentarian M.S. Sumanthiran, President's Council, representing the Tamil National Alliance. We spoke of many things, including Sri Lanka's political scene, the upcoming presidential election, what the TNA's final decision will be on who they will be backing at the upcoming presidential election, and also matters that are of national interest. Thank you very much, Mr. Sumanthiran, for taking time out of your busy schedule. I'm sure that your schedule is jam-packed these days. Thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And sharing your insights with me and our viewers to make a very considerable decision at the upcoming presidential election. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for Face to Face, but do have a great night. Take care and see you soon.